Chapter 4 of the Class 9 History textbook is titled Forest Society and Colonialism. This chapter explores the impact of colonialism on forest resources and the indigenous forest-dwelling communities in India. Here is a brief explanation of the key concepts covered in this chapter. Forests as a source of livelihood. The chapter begins by highlighting the significance of forests as a source of livelihood for many communities in India, particularly the tribal and indigenous populations. It explores the close relationship between these communities and the forest ecosystem. Changes in forest policy. The chapter discusses how British colonial rule brought about significant changes in India's forest policies. It explains the British approach of considering forests as valuable resources for commercial exploitation rather than recognizing the cultural and ecological significance they held for indigenous communities. Impact of British policies. This section focuses on the consequences of the British policies on forests and indigenous communities. It discusses the introduction of scientific forestry practices and the establishment of forest reserves, which limited access to forests for local communities. It also sheds light on the displacement and dispossession experienced by forest-dwelling communities due to the British policies. Resistance by forest communities. The chapter highlights the resistance put up by various forest communities against the colonial authorities. It mentions movements such as the Bishnoi movement in Rajasthan and the Chipko movement in the Himalayan region, which emerged as a response to the destruction of forests and the infringement upon the rights of local communities. Changes in the colonial perception of forests. Towards the end of the chapter, it discusses how the colonial perception of forests changed over time. Initially considered as an obstacle to progress, forests began to be seen as a valuable resource for conservation and recreation, leading to the establishment of national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. In summary, Chapter 4 of the Class 9 History textbook sheds light on the relationship between forest society, colonialism, and the impact of British policies on forests and indigenous communities in India. It also highlights the resistance movements and the changing colonial perception of forests over time. Send a message.